My name is Estela Vazquez. I'm an officer of 1199, and it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you to today's event. So I want to share something about my history. I came to this country August 13, 1965, soon to be 53 years. And my greatest surprise when I came to New York in 1965 is that they did not celebrate May Day in the United States. I came out of a Latin American radical tradition where May Day is a national holiday. Even the right-wing presidents in Latin America congratulate the workers on International Workers' Day. But in the United States, it is not done. Although the birth of May Day is based on the martyrs of Chicago Haymarket Square, but it's a history that work has been erased from the collective memory of workers in this country, and we have an obligation to teach again. Locally, in 2006, due to the incredible mobilizations of Latinos against the anti-immigrant policies, May Day has been revived around the country, and I hope that all of you are joining the demonstrations on Tuesday.
Yes!
As a gentleman whose picture is right over there said once, "Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." So long live international proletarian solidarity. It is my great honor and pleasure to call to the mic my sister, compañera, comrade of many struggles, Suzanne Rose, to open the event today. Again, welcome, bienvenidos, and the struggle continue. Free Mumia! Free them all!
Free them all!
Free them all!
Free them all!
Thank you. Suzanne?
Well, speaking about, first of all, welcome again, and everybody, all of us, on behalf of all of us, and give everybody, all of us, a round of applause for working so hard all the time. I'm just looking around, such hard workers, such hard workers. I want to start the program by reading a message about a lifelong anti-imperialist who just got out of prison after 45 years.
Yes!
So, we've been asked and I'm talking, of course, about Herman Bell. And he is a much beloved, much respected, much cherished revolutionary. And the people who have organized a lot of the work around him, the support work around him, sent out a message. So I want to explain why I'm not screaming and yelling as I would want to celebrate him being released. So this is the message that they sent out. On Friday, April 27th, it's just 2 days ago, it's hard to believe, a 70-year-old respected elder was released after serving nearly 45 years in prison. Herman was one of thousands of incarcerated older people who was repeatedly denied parole for over a decade after completing his minimum sentence, which was 25 years. His release is a result of important and urgent changes in the criminal legal system and parole regulations that are part of nationwide efforts to end mass incarceration. Let us hope that Herman's release brings inspiration for more change. Herman is deeply humbled and grateful for the broad expressions of trust and support, but out of respect for the feelings of the victims' families, he will not be making any public statements. We welcome him home. Now, we got word in Philadelphia, you know, tomorrow's a big, very critical court hearing for Mumia in Philadelphia. And the widow, who is a stooge of the police, has been for decades, Maureen Faulkner, the widow of the cop who was originally killed and for which Mumia was charged, has put out a statement saying this cop killer, referring to Herman Bell, is now home And we don't want to see that happen to Mumia. So we are going to be in court very, very early tomorrow. In a few minutes, Gil Obler will be here and he'll be saying bus tickets and car tickets for those who still have not bought tickets. But this case, this issue of mass incarceration is a life and death issue for thousands and thousands of people, among whom Herman Bell and Mumia Abu-Jamal. So we celebrate quietly out of respect for Herman's wishes. So this event was originally planned as a small event to give Marais Phenom a chance to give a report on her international work, and this conference is happening in France, in Paris, called the Bandung of the North. And I don't know how this developed into this amazing cast of characters that we have speaking today. One after another, it seemed impossible not to include them at this moment. And of course, this moment also is a moment when Mumia's book on imperialism has just come out. So I was telling Mumia about how this, I saw him on Thursday, I was telling him about how this event developed. He said it's the moment, the historical moment, imperialism, and how many voices are coming together to talk about that. So we'll be having them speak very briefly, but before anybody leaves this room, I want first of all to thank Johnny Stevens. Johnny, will you raise your hand in the back? Without whom this could not have been done. Everything he does. International Action Center for all the support they've given us, non-stop, including this space while they're trying to work on the May Day event on Tuesday. When we came in, everything was all set up for May Day. They cleared it up for us, and as always, made space available on very, very short notice, and more than graciously, really as constant comrades. I also want to thank the two people who are serving the food in the back. Could you both raise your hands? Alma and Devlin. And I have to, and also, part of Workers' World and International Action Center, and I have to say this, though she'll kill me. Leland Schoenstein did the flyer, and she is an incredible political artist. Could you raise your hand? And she is mad at me, I can tell. But so many people commented on this flyer, and she's done this over and over again. Where's Leland? Right here in the front row. Estela was one of the people, and Elena is, of course, a longtime activist, and the funny thing is someone said to me, who did this flyer? We've got to use her. Yes. So, our speakers, we have a very powerful group of speakers and are adding to it because we have 3 guests from Venezuela, and at this moment we couldn't not have them in the program, so they're going to be part of the program as well. But our first speaker is Marais Phenom, who, where is Mireille? She's probably in the back. Oh, there she is. Mireille, of course, is the president of the Fanon Foundation in Paris, and that foundation has sponsored so many events and done so many things in this last period. Way before that, she had already done lots of international work, and of course been a supporter of Mumia for a long time. She also was part of, she was for I guess a couple of years, 3 years, was an expert. This is in human rights, United Nations language. So her title was expert, and she had been at that time the chair of the United Nations Working Group on People of African Descent. And she will talk a lot about people of African descent and what the various movements in the world are doing about that, as well as educate us about this upcoming conference of in Bandung. And For those who don't know, Bandung is a name that, and she will talk about that as well, but the original Bandung Conference was in 1955 in Indonesia, and it was a major anti-colonial conference that started many processes in the anti-colonial movement. And this coming one that's coming in May is the one for 2018 is called Bandung of the North. So Mireille will say more about that. Please welcome my friend, comrade, and activist and scholar. What else do we call you? Come on up, Renee.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Very good.
Good. I'm very happy to go back in this room.
Yeah.
I was there, I think 1 month ago or 2 months ago, or maybe later. Just regarding what Suzanne said about my my UN expertise. I just ended my mandate last September. Last September, not 3 years ago.
You had it for 3 years, no?
I have 6 years.
Oh.
I did that during 6 years. And we had a country visit in US, if you remember, and if you read the report, you can watch it on the website of the African UN Working Group of African Descent. You can get it on this. And there was a little noise around the report because I imposed to the working group to speak on reparation, if you remember. Okay, I wrote, as usual, I wrote my paper because I'm not fluent in English, and also to don't think in French when I am thinking in English. It creates a lot of embarrassment and confusion. That's why I prefer to read it. And I am there to be tomorrow in Philadelphia for the hearing. And it is my first reason why I am here. And to support Mumia since a long time now. I don't remember exactly when, but long time. And we hope to get the reopening of his file. And I have to present of Bandung of South, Bandung of North, and reparation. And you will see there is some link between South, North, and reparation. And you can see where is the, here. Here it is the flyer for the Bandung of North in Paris from 3 to 6 May, next week. And one of the speakers are already Angela Davis. Mumia Abu-Jamal is the godfather of the Bandung, and he will send a message, but also Léonard Pelletier, and also George Ibrahim Abdallah. I don't know if you know him. George Ibrahim Abdallah is one of the oldest prisoner in French country, political, from Lebanon. And he was accused of a crime he did not commit, of course. And even the French secret said he was not there when the crime was committed. But even with that, he is not released. Even if every year some judge asks for his release, until now is not released, and now it is 30 years in French jail. It's not specifically US tradition. And also there will be a message from Danny Glover and from others people. Okay. Bandung is no longer a proper name, or more precisely, for more than half a century, Bandung has become the name of our common. In 1955, the Bandung Conference brought together representatives from 29 African and Asian countries, politically grounding the idea of the Third World, now known as the Global South, turning its back on the capitalist West and as a real socialism. This Afro-Asian alliance is built on much more than just geography. If South Africa apartheid, colonialist Israel, or counter-revolutionary Taiwan were excluded, it was because this summit announced an uncompromising political project, that of transcending the geopolitical dishes of which the great imperial powers had until then used to hide their brutality. Its ambition was to unite all the opponents of colonialism and imperialism in search of a new political, intellectual, and cultural autonomy. As Frantz Fanon wrote, I quote, "Bandung is a historical commitment of oppressed people to help one another and to impose a definitive retreat on the exploitation forces," end quote. In the North, this call inspired Black Americans in particular were moved by the future they were offered. The hurt, I quote, "the hurt, the insult, the wounded, the dispossessed." In short, it was the oppressed of the human race who were gathering. The consciousness of class, race, and religion manifests itself on a world scale, unquote. And this quote is from Richard Wright, who attended the debate. Malcolm X considered there as a model. The capacity of the former colonized to meet, despite their difference around a primordial struggle against white supremacy, was to inspire the black diaspora. It still animated us. But time passed. In the spring of Bandung, still acquainted with the strategy of non-violence that offered its independence to India, succeeded the summer of armed conflict. But the counter-revolution was no longer in coming, and here we are again at the heart of autumn, no, of the colonial winter. Neocolonialism, the ultimate stage of imperialism, has been slashed, taking the reasonable pace of international institutions, IMF, World Bank, under the name of structural adjustment. They orchestrated a neoliberal blackmail that has strived to put the southern state on their knees, for the greater benefit of Western capitalist and comprador elites. At the same time, the apostles of the imperialist war did not hesitate to exhume the old notion of just war to better base the rapacity of the empires of the North on the mirage of humanitarianism. Those who are exiled to the West, seeking to flee their unbearable devastation, are hindered by walls, checkpoints, fascist militia, and border guards. State racism has been constantly reinventing itself in haste and fear, in the face of the inevitable intellectual, economic, and political decade of white and Christian Europe and America. The cynical cyclic repressive violence that eats strikers, protesters, and rioters is the ultimate proof of political impotence, bandaging the muscle of its corpse, unable to stem a rebellion that has become chronic. It is irremediable. The countries of Europe are no longer themselves. The empire have dreamed of being confused with the worldwide remaining white and realized their dream with weapon in the hand. They were planting their roots in Africa, America, Asia, but believed they could preserve their national racial homogeneity, already doubtful. It was a misconception that the child born of the rape of an enslaved does not share the trait of the master. In northern country, racial diversity is now the norm, The politicization of this new condition is an invaluable challenge. This implied thinking about the meeting of heterogeneous population, but linked by common interest, indigenous people who through the America continue to struggle for their sovereignty, the old diaspora descendant of enslaved transships from the African coast, the new post-colonial diaspora, linked in particular to capitalism exploitation or political and social exclusion. Of this new land of the earth, projected by the history in the earth of the white empires, Bandung of the North wants to facilitate the dialogue. If these voices are indispensable, it is because the political statu quo in which we are currently incarcerated is unbearable. Fascism offers no escape from neoliberal winter, but rather an intensification of its most deadly slopes. The foolish project of capitalism in one country, which would benefit only one race, will generate new apartheid and ethnic cleansing in quantity. However, will we have the luxury of being happy with the political offer of the current left? In France, Spain, Italy, and Belgium, the populist strategy was able to gather its voters only at the price of a return intoxicated with national flag, still soiled with the blood of our ancestors, and with chauvinistic harangues that this ancient colonial metropolis have hosted with ecstasy. A whole section of this left, denying state racism, only envisaged its unity at the cost of the exclusion of racial minority and especially of the social interests they carry. Their xenophobic treatment of religious and migratory questions is the exorbitant proof. Because they are the most familiar with the violence and lies that the so-called democratic states are capable of, it is up to the non-white diaspora to pioneer new political ways. To achieve this, it is necessary to found a decolonial international. Its three main axes will be the fight against state racism that condemns us to social death, the struggle against imperialism that made capitalism, extractivism, and wars of conquest the law of the world. And lastly, the dissolution of the ideology of modernity, which condemns us to live in the perverse and unachievable dreams of white supremacy. In 1955, the Bandung Conference gave body and voice to the people who made up most of the world. Pursuing this unfinished work of humanization, the Bandung of the North announced the dawn of a new sun. Let it burn the ancient world and see us reappear untouched in the midst of ruined empires. I would say that one of the first engagements to be done is to force the former colonial empire to pay its debt, and one of the most enormous is the voluntarily forgotten crimes committed against humanity introduced by the discovery that led to the greatest demographic and metaphysic catastrophe. The only way to settle the crimes of genocide and the crimes against humanity is to force the colonizing state to repair them because they have built their wealth on the life and blood of our ancestors, and they legally organize their impunity. It is a question of reparation and restoration of the sense of humanity, to stop the ideology of domination, asking the victim to pay not only the price of his alienation, but also that of his new servitude, as well as Haiti, which is 1825 had to pay for 200 years a debt in payment of his independence, and some newly liberated states of the colonial yoke that have not yet stopped paying a colonial tax that subjects them to obligation. And most of these countries, these African countries, are francophone, as you may imagine. Let us not be deceived. The abolition of enslavement, presented as the indispensable measure to restore the enslaved in their citizenship, was only for the purpose of perpetuating a system of domination operating in the same hierarchical sense from new former slave owners to new liberated enslaved. Are not they, from this time, precarious new employees, de facto condemned to continue working on the plantation of their former master, which for decades has frozen the economy of exploitation? It can be said that the abolition adopted by special law combine at the same time the compensation of the master, which confirms them in the certainty that they had done well, the refusal of the compensation of the enslaved people, and that of an agrarian reform, which keeps them in a subhuman statute. What was done at the time should be done today, but still cannot be realized since former enslaver state denied the reality of the palpable consequences of enslavement. In a word, the state continued to pursue with method its colonial policy in order to maintain a regime of exploitation, even if it seems to make some concession. It is not wrong to affirm that the attitude of the former colonized state is, in this respect, astonishing and organized towards a culture of impunity, whereas crimes against humanity are imprescriptible even in international law. How to interpret this voluntary amnesia, and especially how to analyze it? We must return to the perception of the human being developed by the Western country, where, in contexts marked by racial violence and colonial dispossession, humanity has never been a common and shared condition, but a privilege. It can be said that the problem of constructing the ideology of politics of race in order to categorize humanity has been exemplary. The reparation obliged to redefine the framework from which the human rights must be shared and to move away from the references which drain with them crimes against humanity, genocide, theft, war. It is therefore interesting to read the first French Constitution as well as the Declaration of Independence of the United States. One affirms the freedom and equality of rights among all citizens, which had already been guaranteed by the Declaration of the Human Rights and Citizens from 1789. In the meantime, millions of people have fallen by the wayside, enslaved. They are excluded from all rights, and it is on this lie that was built, on the one hand, the French nation, and the other hand, its reputation as fatherland of the human rights. The other, in its Declaration of Independence, United States emphasizes that, I quote, "we hold for obvious," maybe the translation is not good, but you know exactly what I am referring, the following truths: all made are created equal. They are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the search for happiness, unquote. For all, that the maintenance of enslavement of all those who were there has not ceased or reduced between this declaration and the final abolition. Well beyond the abolition, this ideology of domination continued. The United States then passed to the Jim Crow law, which installed a new old social order, and then to a justice which does not still punish the crimes committed, thereby organizing impunity for the police and reinforcing structural racism, a common element of all former colonial countries. The Western world owes its existence to its acceptance to consider millions of people inferior to its citizens. This was possible only because to take these two countries, the dominant ones showed a deliberate blindness of what constitutes in those whom they tore off from their continent their humanity, their sense of the other, their relationship to the land, and the laws and customs that allowed them to be in the world, and this despite the wars, between tribes and even slavery as a war practice. The white people practiced enslavement in the name of the king or God and progress, but certainly not in the name of the human. The self-proclaimed superiority of Europe was built on the declared inferiority of millions of human beings, dehumanized by Code Noir or Black Code in US, a way to arrogate power to territories and wealth, but also on the thought, the construction of knowledge, which would limit the national narrative of the greatest bankruptcy of the humanity, which in fact also gave their power over the being and especially over the non-being that were enslaved and who will then become worker, poor, women, exclude migrants, all who are fundamentally banned from visibility and voice. This ontological lie that continue to gangrene the perception of what the human should be comes from the power that white Europeans have imposed by the installation of a moral Manichaeism based on the apprehension of the human by race. It has been developed to such a level that it is from this belief that the social world has been organized, preventing by all possible means that the man, just out of his condition of enslavement, cannot neither to question the world, nor to become agent of transformation or interrogation, and still less to accept the institutional inferiority in which the dominant ones maintain him. There is an obligation to decolonize the enclosing and never effective discourse on human rights, and especially that put in place since the abolition. The freedom of the new free has resulted in the maintenance of the established order, the obligation to work, and the unfailing recognition of the emancipatory republic or state, and especially this the obligation to forget the past. It is the erasure of this past which is reflected in the various declarations and other international normative instruments, with measures making it possible to restrict it in different fields and contexts. Not to mention that at the end of enslavement and colonialism, justice has been a justice apart, and especially on the margin of common law, which can still be seen in the Caribbean and America, where the land still belongs to those who acquire it through violence and theft. It is not a question of making this declaration more moral or more just, but of reflecting under the impetus of the damned a new definition of humanity based on the perception that the colonized, the damned, have of what should be the humanity. It is indeed the whole colonial matrix that must be deconstructed in order to bring out social relations that are free from the ethno-racial reference and to bring out a humanity sought out of the lines of force imposed by modernity, where man can relate to man wherever he is, because the decolonial condition will allow him to escape collectively from the zone of non-being. It is question of love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mireille. I'm very eager to, as many of us I'm sure are, to hear the results of Bandung conference that's happening next week. Mireille didn't mention all the names, but there's some very powerful people from around the world participating in that conference. I just want to say a word that some people might wonder, or maybe not, why a Mumia group, and by the way, I'm the international spokesperson for International Concerned Family and Friends of Mumia Abu-Jamal, and the head of that organization is a small woman back there named Pam Africa. And not only did Pam come here from Philadelphia, and I told her not to because we all have to be in court so early tomorrow morning. But we have a whole bunch of people from Philadelphia. And I want to welcome all the people from Philadelphia to stand up so we can acknowledge you properly. So it is really wonderful to have you. New York and Philadelphia, when it comes to the Mumia movement, are really sister cities. And people always say, somebody said to me the other day, oh, Pam loves to come to New York. Pam comes to New York to do work all the time. She doesn't come to hang out and go to see the theater and things like that. So she comes when she's exhausted, and she comes whenever she's needed, and she comes in solidarity. And people often have said to me when they see me in Philadelphia, do you live in Philadelphia? You always say, we really go back and forth from Philadelphia to New York a lot. But I just also want to say that it's not by chance that a Mumia group is pulling together an international event like this and a program about imperialism. And it's not just because Mumia is an internationalist, a revolutionary internationalist, and his perspective has always been like that. But from the first beginnings of this movement, and MOVE really preceded a lot of this, Pam and Ramona Africa were traveling all over the world speaking. All over Europe, Pam was in Cuba, and then when I came around, I began playing some of that role and have traveled to many, many countries myself. And most recently, have been in Venezuela a few times, and we have, as I said earlier, we're going to have some speakers from Venezuela. And our politics, internationalism is often misinterpreted, or the word is used casually. Our politics has been always of reciprocity. We don't come to countries to just ask for solidarity for Mumia, for political prisoners. We go to Venezuela to give solidarity to the people and government of Venezuela. We go to Haiti to give solidarity to the people of Haiti. Wherever we go in the world, that is the message. So I just want to say something about that, the politics and the history of this movement on this issue. So our next speaker is, when you hear what Mireille was talking about, our next speaker who will be talking about Mumia's book. Mumia's book is, so I know most people didn't get a chance to read it, but you will, I'm sure. His book is so filled with concepts of humanity and inhumanity and the denial of humanity to large sectors of the population. I guess the next speaker knows that he's about to speak. On cue. So I'm very happy to welcome Glenn Ford, a much respected and admired revolutionary intellectual, and he's going to review this quite remarkable book.
Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the freedom fighter, Abu-Jamal, and of course to his co-author, Mr. Vittoria. Mumia and Stephen have produced, I think, a kaleidoscope of a book. It's a sweeping, panoramic examination of the rise, but not yet fall, of the U.S. empire. Mr. Vittoria writes that he originally wanted to tell this story in a 90-minute film, but then he came to his senses and he spoke to Mumia, and they decided that they would do it in 300 pages. And that alone is remarkably ambitious, because if you're going to tell the story of the United States and its so-called civilization, then you have to tell the story of European colonialism and the European war against the world that then led to the creation of this supposedly indispensable and very exceptional and oh so unique country that claims the right to lord it over all the other peoples of the earth. When you're writing a book, when you're making any kind of presentation and it is a critique of the powers that be, you run into the same problem, whether you're a radio reporter like Mumia used to be before they snatched him up into the gulag, or anyone else making a presentation against the rulers. The rulers lie all the time. Everything they say is propaganda. And everything they say is the opposite of truth. It's not just not true. It's the opposite of truth. They turn truth on its head. In fact, the best way to find out what's truth is to do the opposite or read the opposite of what they say. But this creates another burden on those who are trying to tell the truth, because before we can even present an examination and analysis of what is really going on in reality, we have to wade through their lies. And everything they say is a lie. And so then it becomes incumbent on us to put together an alternative examination of history. And I think that this book measures up to that mission that is imposed on us. I think we're seeing here that the premise of this book is that the empire is now and always has been at war with the darker peoples of the earth. It's not just a saga about this king or that king. It is a war undertaken by the rulers of a certain part of the world against everybody. As Abu-Jamal and Victoria write, American history is founded in genocide, nurtured through slavery, and perpetuated by endless war. The rulers of the United States deny, that's one of their lies. They deny that they're presiding over an empire. But the English white settlers certainly saw their outpost on the East Coast as an empire in the making. They were quite conscious of what they were doing. And they didn't mind saying so, that they were going westward and south and north and any place else they could steal and plunder. That was their political project, empire building. We see an amazing continuity in the behavior of this white supremacist empire at all of its stages of development. It's not a mysterious kind of motion. They do the same thing over and over again, only limited by their capabilities to plunder and rob and steal and, of course, lie. Yesteryear's manifest destiny is essentially the same as today's U.S. exceptionalism. It is the same doctrine. It provides justification for every crime that the empire commits against weaker peoples. As the authors put it, although the term manifest destiny was coined in 1845, the seeds, they say, of manifest destiny arrived with Christopher Columbus when he stumbled onto the shores of North America. It is a pan-Western European doctrine. When the U.S. says that it's going to bomb Syria, no matter what the United Nations Security Council says, which they did just a couple of weeks ago, what the U.S. is saying is that it has an exceptional right to violate international law. Enough said, and then they bombed. Just as when the U.S. wanted a canal to connect under their auspices the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, they simply took the territory of Panama away from the sovereign nation of Colombia. And most Americans don't even know that that happened, that Panama was created for the convenience of the United States and the wealth of the people who rule it. When King George told the white settlers that they could not go across the Allegheny Mountains to steal more Indian land, more Native American land, they decided that they had the unique and exceptional right to reject their government's sovereignty over them and go across the Allegheny. But to do that, they had to declare independence from the British Crown. They thought that that was their God-given destiny, and the rest is our lying-ass history. and it was manifested after 1776. Although these same white settlers rejected their Englishness, they more deeply embraced, especially after independence, more deeply embraced their whiteness. And they would later create the world's most racially regimented society, a Jim Crow order that inspired Adolf Hitler, and Adolf Hitler said so.
That's right.
Hitler, of course, was surely a Holocaust for the Jews, but the European breakout of 1492 was the mother of all human holocausts.
That's right.
It was a catastrophe, a disaster, a cataclysm, which is the way Palestinians describe what happened to them in 1948. It was a Nakba for all the peoples. 1/5 of the world population died in the half century after Christopher Columbus got off that boat in Hispaniola. That's 20% of humanity gone. Whole nations of Native Americans were wiped off the face of the earth. A death from disease and from forced labor and starvation was at 95% and sometimes 100%. Hitler did his death camps, but the white settlers created a hemisphere of death, 2 continents of death. Mumia and Vittoria's book notes that between 60 and 80 million Africans died or lost their freedom to this Nakba, the aftermath of Columbus in 1492. It was a disaster like the world has never seen and has not seen since, although the current rulers of the United States certainly have some horrors in store for us that may match it. The European slave trade took the lives, as we said, of 60 million Africans. Now, the Arabs and the Persians had traded Africans, but the European slave system transformed the world, replacing and displacing whole peoples. As Eric Williams wrote in 1944, this slave trade propelled Europe's rise to global economic dominance and helped finance the Industrial Revolution. A century before, Eric Williams said that, a guy named Karl Marx wrote that it is slavery that has given the colonies their value. It is the colonies that have created world trade, and it is world trade that is the precondition for large-scale industry. It therefore follows that slavery created the conditions for the very existence of the industrial working class. Edward Batiste, he has a wonderful book, came out in 2014. It's titled The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. And it shows how the overseers speeded up the cotton picking process to such a degree, so fiercely, that they doubled and even tripled the production of cotton per acre without introducing even one technological innovation. And that made the owners fantastically rich. And so this was an industrial scale kind of work, with the slaves doing industrial scale work and being themselves bundled and sold and insured under a securities bundle kind of arrangement, which was very, very much like, almost identical legally to, the kind of housing bundles that we heard about, that we only learned about in terms of popular knowledge after the 2007 meltdown. In their book, Vittoria and Mumia wrote, for 200 years, American historians and propagandists, and they're often the same thing, American historians and propagandists have conveniently tried to frame slavery as somehow pre-capitalist, when in fact this horrific chapter in Europe and America's history is inherent in the wealth building of the modern era. And I would add that lots of folks who call themselves leftists and Marxists also tried to put slavery somehow to the side as if it did not involve a working class, even as black folks were working on a speeded up industrial schedule, making this cotton for the industrialists in Britain to become fantastically wealthy about. This book even takes a look at the great Zanj black slave rebellion in Iraq that occurred in 869. And the authors report that there are Iraqis today who consider themselves to be black, and that during the occupation, they were hoping, or some of them were hoping, that President Obama, the chief occupier, might do something for these black Iraqis. And some black folks back here thought that he ought to do that too, but none of this came to pass. But Obama, no less than any other US president, showed the continuity of US imperial policy, and that it is rooted in manifest destiny. And I think his blackness actually points up the continuity, that it does not really matter. Obama's predecessor, George Bush, sabotaged the Durban World Conference on Racism that was in Durban, South Africa back in 2001. That conference was designed to address the issue of compensation for slavery and for colonialism. The conference mandate was to make Europe and its white settler colonies accountable for the crimes of the Great Nakba that began in 1492, and which, of course, continues today. The United States was conceived as a nation to perpetuate those crimes, crimes that it celebrates as it turns truth on its head, crimes it celebrates as the apex of civilization, with them being the apex. And so that Durban conference that was sabotaged in 2001 had to be similarly torpedoed in 2009, and that was the role of President Obama. Obama's sabotage of Durban too, in the first year of his presidency, showed definitively that nothing post-racial even remotely occurred in the United States with his election. The first black president was defending the global racial and economic order that sprang from the catastrophe of 1492. That's right. Western Europe had made war on the world. It enslaved and it plundered the darker majority of the world. And they called that the spread of civilization. They called that the spread of a superior civilization. And they still claim, after all these crimes, half a millennium of crimes, they still claim that they are a superior civilization. In the process of that destruction, they destroyed or retarded the two biggest economies in the world, the economies of India and China, in addition to the rape of Africa and the annihilation of the peoples of the Americas. So if this is civilization, then it is a civilization that we must destroy, along with the capitalist system that was birthed in the blood of slaves. That's right. The United States is today determined to complete the global conquest that was launched by Europe in 1492. It seeks world hegemony of global capitalism, headquartered in the white supremacist United States. That mission is the same whether the president is Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. And that means that our mission, which is Mumia and Victoria's mission, is to first end this 500-year Euro-American war against the rest of the planet. And two, it is to transform the social relations among our people so that the forces of war and exploitation do not rise again. We've got to stop the Nakba, the ongoing catastrophe. The perfection and the completion of this global conquest, this Nakba for humanity, is the goal of both the Republican Party and the Democratic parties, both of which answer to the economic architects of human enslavement and the subordination of humankind to capital and to white supremacy. That world order is actually codified in legal terms in the structures of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was devised under President Obama, and which President Trump, now having been advised by his Goldman Sachs and other advisors, President Trump is now talking about resurrecting this TPP that he had railed against previously. If the United States cannot achieve this kind of world economic order at the point of a gun through negotiations, then they will just do so by raw force. They have plunged the world into terror, and they put that terror in the guise of a war on terror. They claim to be fighting against terror when they are the creators of terror. It's a war in which they have brazenly financed and armed and diplomatically protected the various brands of Al-Qaeda, who are the very same jihadists that they claim to be fighting against. Their capacity for lies is infinite. Indeed, their corporate media's foreign coverage is now nothing but lies. And I'm sure you join me in saying that it's very difficult to actually watch the corporate media. Nothing comes out of the bourgeois mouth but lies. It's difficult to justify watching their nightly newscasts with the idea that, well, I can get a glimmer of truth, because often there is not even a glimmer of truth in their coverage. But it's actually been much like that in the past. The lies of the present are built on the lies of the past. The white man's burden under Great Britain becomes full spectrum dominance under the imperial United States. The centuries of terror that ensued after 1492 are repeated in the US-led terror in Libya and Syria and elsewhere. King Leopold's slaughter of 10 million Congolese is being matched by the genocide of 6 million Congolese under Presidents Clinton and President Bush and Obama and now Donald Trump. And that's why Mumia and Vittoria's book is so valuable. It is sweeping. It does have the effect that Vittoria envisioned when he was thinking about that movie. It is informed largely by the voices of those who witnessed and opposed the Nakba over the last 500 years as it enveloped and then transformed the world over the space of half a millennium. This book and other books reinforces our determination that this epoch of human history be brought to an end. We don't have a whole bunch of different struggles and movements. The larger movement is to bring to an end this period that we can date to 1492. It tells us, and I'm talking about the book, that arms production escalates in the United States, not just because it is fantastically profitable, although it is, but because it is necessary to maintain the capacity to wage war on most of the planet all of the time, which is U.S. strategic planning. They plan to wage simultaneous wars in different parts of the planet. And just as Britain destroyed the industries of India and of China and humiliated China in the process to achieve its supremacy, the United States tries desperately to contain and coerce the rising economies of the East. Although it can't figure out how to do it, it does try. The Monroe Doctrine still lives. It's not dead at all. It was extended to the Pacific with the seizure of Hawaii in the 1800s. And then in 1898 with the colonization of the Philippines. And then President Wilson enforced the Monroe Doctrine with his occupation of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And President Truman extended this Monroe Doctrine kind of thinking to the whole of what he called the free world. And he did that under a nuclear threat. And JFK cited the Monroe Doctrine when he attacked Cuba, and he used that to justify sending the Green Berets all over Latin America and laying the groundwork for most of the nations of South America descending into military dictatorships. And President Eisenhower and President Carter both extended the Monroe Doctrine to the Middle East. They said it was a strategic value to the United States, which is code word for I will go to war over this. And President Reagan enforced the Monroe Doctrine in Grenada in 1983. And President Bush enforced the Monroe Doctrine again in Panama in 1989. And now we have a U.S. Space Command to oversee the planet from on high. And we have an Africa Command to oversee the military occupation of that continent. And we have domestically a judiciary, a court system that is packed with so-called federalist judges. Those are the lawyers who believe that the Constitution should be interpreted in the way that the founding fathers, these founding rich white fathers, intended that it be interpreted. And we know what their intentions were, that this be a white man's country where black people of any status have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Judge Taney told us that was so. In fact, it was one of the longest Supreme Court decisions that was ever reached up to that time in the Dred Scott decision. And if anybody thought that this still wasn't the real effective law of the land in the United States, despite the Civil War and the amendments, they have learned differently with the imposition of the upgraded form of mass black incarceration. That, in fact, was the national response to the black freedom movement of the 60s. It is that new Jim Crow that put Mumia on death row and now life in prison, from where he gives us this book. The world's largest prison system, backed by the world's biggest police state, is the logical product of the Nakba that began in 1492. And it is our duty to bring that catastrophe to an end forever. Power to the people.
I'm getting speechless. Glenn referred to endless wars. I don't know if you caught that, but I guess about a half hour ago, maybe 20 minutes ago, he referred to the endless U.S. wars. And we have been involved, many of us, in fighting many of those wars. And we have an activist scholar among us, somebody who's traveled to many of these wars. She's been in Syria and Iraq. She's been in so many places to help people in the United States see the truth about these wars. Because, you know, we have to rely on the mainstream media, which, as Glenn was just saying, always tells us the opposite of the truth. So we need on-site, and, you know, over the years, I mean, I think back to Vietnam, when we at least could get real photographs of My Lai and of the children that were being napalmed, and the newscasts, though distorted, were so much more alive and real than now. We really could find, that's why the anti-war movement could be so big at that time. People were horrified by what they saw on TV and what they began reading in newspapers. So I want to acknowledge the co-chair of the International Action Center, Sara Flounders, who has been that kind of activist, who has come back and had to convince people that what the United States is saying is not sacrosanct, is not the Bible, or I shouldn't say the Bible, but is not the truth we need to rely on. And I can remember for years her doing this. And I really want to thank you on this occasion for those years of dedicated service to truth and to the truth about what's happening in the world. So please come talk to us.
Power to the people.
Power to the people.
That's the only real power. That is the real power. Welcome everyone here today. What an honor to be able to host this event. Welcome to the Solidarity Center. It's the home of the International Action Center and Workers' World Party, and it's a home to revolutionary organizations that are determined to fight U.S. racism and imperialism. It's home to the People's Power Assembly and Black Lives Matter and migrant struggles and struggles to defend LGBTQ and gender non-conforming people, and always, always it is home to the Mumia Coalition, to the family and friends of Mumia, always. And it's because the struggles against racism and sexism and colonialism are all linked. That is what imperialism is. That's what it is. How to extract the maximum at every minute. So I'm also excited to be part of launching this book, which is such an incredible indictment. When you look at this book, almost your first fantasy, at least mine, was imagine if this was a high school textbook. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine the view we would have of what the U.S. empire is really all about.
Absolutely.
Imagine how people would be empowered. It will be. It will be. It really will be, and there are teachers right now and in the coming school year who will make a point to begin to use it. We can bet on that. We can bet on that. They want to ban this book written in prison from prisons, I'm sure. I'm sure. Just because the level, the amount of education it has. Such an indictment. Written by a revolutionary from right in the very bowels of the empire itself, from the prisons itself. Who knows it better? Who's lived it?
That's right.
Who's fought it? Who never ever gave up?
That's right.
So Murder Incorporated. What a name. What a name. I mean, it really shows this is, both business as usual and it's a criminal syndicate. That's really what it says. And this is book one. This is book one. Are we already waiting for book two?
And three.
And three.
That's right.
Keep writing, Mumia.
That's right.
Really,
Wake
because
us up.
he is not just a revolutionary commentator. He shows himself to be a revolutionary historian who's really tracing this criminal conspiracy back to Columbus, the Spanish conquistadors, European invaders. Really, as Glenn so well said, these pirates of global capitalism that enrich themselves through enslavement, through genocide, through continents of death they created. And so many of the facts are because they bragged about it. They were proud about it. They wrote about it. And the record is still there. So we're not going to let them forget it, and we're going to make it a high school textbook and a revolutionary study guide and use it in 100 ways. Whether we're looking at the U.S. Revolution, never allow again to say, who was it fought for? The slave owners and the shipbuilders and the merchants and the bankers. Really, every page is will knock you off your chair.
Clearly.
So I also wanted to say it's such an honor when I heard that this was combined with an event for the opening of Bandung of the North, this anti-colonial gathering of the North. and as Mireille Fanon describes so well. And as the opening statement, I just want to take a few lines from the opening statement for this conference, its declaration, is to confront racism in every sphere of life as a daily reminder of the legacy of colonialism. Racism on the basis of skin color, also on the basis of religion, origin, and culture. Racism rooted in economic, social, political, and cultural institutions. Racism in health, housing. Racism translated into social segregation in a political system that deprives people of color of speaking their mind, and racism that imposes a dominant narrative of terrorism that facilitates the rise of a police state and deliberately targets people of color. So that's quite an indictment for this conference and a heavy task. I also wanted to say a word about the Bandung conference, April 24th, this week it was, of 1955. A conference for the new Africa and new Asia to be born, held in Indonesia. And it was a time of enormous anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, revolutionary upheaval that was going on throughout Africa and Asia. This meeting, 29 countries, but representing more than half the population of the world. And as they said in their opening declaration, this is the first international conference of people of color in the history of mankind. It's a new departure in the history of the world that leaders of Asian and African people can meet together. So that was quite an accomplishment. It was at a time when the struggle in Algeria against French colonialism had just reached a new level. The struggle in Vietnam against French colonialism had just gained independence for half the country. Just after Dien Bien Phu. Indonesia was newly independent. India and Pakistan, newly independent, 8 years, 10 years. Myanmar, 7 years. The Great Chinese Revolution, which really broke imperialism's hold throughout Asia, was just 6 years before this, 1949, when Mao said the people have stood up. The Korean War had just ended in a terrible stalemate and occupation of the South, a war that cost more than 4 million lives and destroyed every possible building in the North. There were no more targets, as the US bombers said, nothing else to hit or destroy. Also represented there were the countries' top delegations from Syria and Iraq and Iran and Egypt and Turkey and Yemen and Afghanistan, all newly hopeful. Imperialism was strong at that time, but here was this rising tide, newly emerging movements, and leaders and thinkers of the colonial movement. I was looking at a list of who was there. Nasser from Egypt and Chou En-lai of China, Sukarno of Indonesia, Tito from Yugoslavia, Ben Bella of Algeria, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam. Quite an amazing, along with, right from the US, Richard Wright, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. This conference was at a time of enormous revolutionary upheavals, but just to say also that at that time, the majority of the world's people were still isolated, still illiterate, still largely peasant. Women were not yet on the political agenda, the conference. The tasks were basic immunization, literacy, industrialization, electrification, developing irrigation and dams. And so many leaders of the Bandung conference became targets of CIA coups. Isn't that true when you think of Indonesia, Ghana, and throughout Africa? Immediately targeted by the CIA. Huge massacres that followed in an attempt to reconquer, recolonize in new forms. US imperialism was on the rise. It held half the productive capacity of the whole world. It was a huge power. Now, I want to also just touch on just so we see there are different stages in history, I want to raise another international conference after a big revolutionary upsurge among colonized people of Asia. And this was following the Russian Revolution. Huge, it shows that big revolutionary upheavals give rise to far wider upheavals. So it was the Conference of Baku, called the Congress of the Peoples of the East, a huge multinational conference that was held in 1920. There were almost 2,000 delegates, some of whom had to travel for months and face assassinations and bombings and railroad blockades, invading armies. There were 22 Western countries invading Russia at this time, to get to this conference. And it was a conference of the revolutionary and nationalist movements of the colonial East. It was quite an accomplishment that it was held. And it represented the national and colonial liberation movements when in their very earliest stages. It was largely a group of anti-colonial fighters. And the movements for national independence were just beginning. That was 1920. So you can see what a leap already to 1955, when countries were finally breaking the immediate hold of colonialism. Now, at that Congress in Baku, the main target was Britain and Britain's hold in Asia. But the Congress also made a call for equality for the rights between genders, unconditional access of women to education, equality in marriage rights, an end to polygamy, employment of women in government institutions, the establishment of committees for the rights and protection of women. So you see, when you look at some of the countries such as Afghanistan today, what a surge there was then and who has dragged it back with occupation and invasions. Who's responsible? This is US imperialism, deadly. Non-stop war there since at least 2001, but you could go back to the 1990s. And that's just talking about Afghanistan.
1970s.
Yep, that's true. Now, today, US imperialism is in a pretty desperate situation. And this should give us a certain level of confidence. They have nothing to offer the world at all except weapons and more arms sales, more weapons, and debt. That's about the limit. Today, it's a waning power. Britain and France, imperialists, they still try to attach themselves to every US effort. If bombers are going into Syria, they just got to attach themselves. If they're bombing Libya, well, there's the French and the British, they're just along for the ride. They want to reconquer. Just today in the news, there was another article on the French in Mali in Africa and the US role in Syria, new bombing. Now, every US war is also an effort to stop all development. And this is what, as Mumia described, underdevelopment, create underdevelopment. What do they target? They bomb the schools and the hospitals. They bomb the dams and the electric grid and the roads and the bridges. Pharmaceutical industry, very good target. Every country. Look at the US war on Libya. Total destruction. The wealthiest, most modern country in Africa. And today, they're slave markets. That is US wars. It is destruction and domination and humiliation. Now, we don't know from one week to the next who's the next target of US imperialism. A week ago, it was Syria. Huge bombing campaign, as I say, the French and the British attached themselves to it. Again, new provocation claimed it was a gas attack. There was Syria on the very eve of victory against the tens of thousands of mercenaries that flooded into Syria. And 2 weeks before that, it seemed like there was going to be an absolute massive destruction in Korea against the people of North Korea, who suffered, with the whole country traumatized by the US war of a generation ago and being threatened today. And then you see the news yesterday of North and South clasping hands, determined, really, because it is a national sentiment there too, both knowing what a US war would mean, that there's no care for people of the South, it's all about US domination. So it's extremely unpredictable. The threats are on Russia and China and Iran, and definitely always the threat is here at home, because a war at home is being intensified to a level that we haven't seen in generations. The level of cutbacks that every city, every state is facing, every social program is facing, the continuing escalation in prisons and police force, the raids and the roundups of migrants, it really accentuates day after day. Just to touch back again though, back to the Baku conference, back to the Bandung conference. Today also, peoples of the colonies are migrating in huge numbers into the centers of imperialism because their own countries have become so unlivable because of US wars. Because economic dislocation and wars force them under the most difficult conditions. And it changes the character of the working struggles right here, where in every industrial center of the US and of Europe are peoples of Asia and Africa and Latin America. And this is the most exciting and important developments for the working class movement here, isn't it? It's really making big changes and big challenges. Because imperialism is in decline. It's unable to impose its will. The economy is in a precarious condition. We call it capitalism at a dead end. It's both so powerful that it lurches from one catastrophe to the next, huge surpluses that it can't possibly sell. And it's failed in every effort of regime change in years. The war in Afghanistan is this current war going on, 17 years. We're in the 8th year of the war in Syria with tens of thousands of mercenaries. And yet, Syria has survived. And there's great determination on the part of Syria to survive. And Korea has managed to arm and defend itself. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea. That's quite an accomplishment in the face of the heaviest sanctions ever imposed on any country in the world. They've managed to arm and defend themselves. The US says, how dare you? Get rid of your nuclear weapons. There's more than 10,000 nuclear weapons right here. Can People's Korea have 8 or 10 weapons? No. In the name of peace, they want to destroy that. They're not even succeeding in the poorest country in the world, Yemen, where it's a proxy war through Saudi Arabia, but it's entirely carried out by the US Navy and aircraft and contractors. So there's a war on the world going on many, many different parts of the world, attempting to drag countries back and attempting to drag the population right here back along with them. And that's what Trump means when he says, we want to make America great again. That is a racist promise. That is a racist declaration. And it's read that way. It's understood that way. It's not succeeding very well, though. And that we want to take heart in. We really do. Because the wars come home, vast increases of repression and cutbacks and public services and schools and and the struggles come home too. So it's more important than any time in history for peoples here in the Imperialist Center, whether it's the US, or the conference in France, or in Britain, or any of the NATO countries, to stand with the people of the world, because our collective liberation is more bound together than at any time in history. I want to end this talk, actually, I don't want to tell you the end of the book, but this is Mumia's statement at the end of the book. The power of no. The power of no. No to empire, no to capitalism, no to racism. The people united will never be defeated.
We are on a roll here, and we haven't even finished. So our next speaker is Professor Tony Monteiro, who is well known in Philadelphia, with people coming to his classes on Saturday, not on a campus, and not because they get credit for the course, but because they want to learn. And I hear Pam complaining when she has to miss that class. So, you know, he does some job on educating lots and lots of people. And I'm hoping, I'm having him speak as the last speaker, that we will have speaker from Venezuela and so on, but last scheduled speaker, because I'm hoping that when he speaks about peacemakers, Tony, this is my request, that it points in some positive direction. We need some positive direction, don't we?
Absolutely.
Okay. I also later want to acknowledge a few more people who are wonderful, wonderful audience we have here. So Tony Monteiro, Professor Tony Monteiro.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you, Suzanne, and all of the other organizers of this event for inviting me. A very illustrious panel of speakers. I would like, as Suzanne suggested, to maybe speak about the future. The future is today. It is what we do now that will decide the future, the geography of the future. In many ways, is in the hands of the vanguard and what it is able to do in assisting the broad masses, especially the principal victims of colonialism, imperialism, and the white supremacist social system in fighting for a common future. In other words, we are at a pivotal political and ideological moment. Ideas can decide the future. The crisis of imperialism and white supremacy has reached a stage, to use the words of W.E.B. Du Bois in his last great history of Africa called The World in Africa, Europe is collapsing. It is this collapse of Europe now, after almost 75 years of a historic moment where, to offset this collapse, U.S. imperialism became the foundation of the Western system, financing it, militarily protecting it, and ideologically organizing it. This almost 75-year period is now coming to an end. And we have the great fortune of witnessing the collapse of Europe, which is the collapse of the system that is, of course, 500 years old. But in this stage, 75 years old. And thus, what we do can be decisive. And whether or not we have the proper understanding of this moment is pivotal. I'd like to talk about the struggle for peace, which was deeply rooted in the Bandung vision. There's not been a serious revolutionary of the 20th century that did not put peace at the top of the people's agenda. Peace, bread, and land, the Bolsheviks declared. Ho Chi Minh and the leaders of the Vietnamese anti-colonial and independence movement declared that they not only wanted human rights, but they wanted peace. The Chinese revolutionaries as well declared that peace was always central to the well-being of humanity. Every serious leader of the people of this country have declared that peace was at the heart of the struggle for justice and against oppression. It is for this reason that I would like, in the brief time that I have, to draw your attention to three of the great fighters for peace and the well-being of our people and of humanity that have arisen from this soil: W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and Martin Luther King Jr. Are exemplars of Bandung in the U.S. Let me begin by just letting you know that this is the 150th anniversary of the birth of W.E.B. Du Bois. For us, it is a very significant occasion. In Philadelphia, the City Council has declared this the year of Du Bois. Which is not a small matter, given that Du Bois has been in many ways erased from our history, as has been Paul Robeson, for the simple reason that they fought for peace. Du Bois was declared an agent of a foreign government, to which he responded, "I'm not an agent of any government, I'm an agent of peace." Speaking to the revolutionary essence and anti-imperialist content of the fight for peace, Du Bois reminded his accusers, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called communist." Is that praise for the communists or condemnation for the peacemakers? Neither he nor Paul Robeson could attend Bandung because their passports were taken by the United States government. Du Bois was quite explicit in urging the delegates to Bandung to be suspicious of those Negroes from the United States who were in attendance. Because how, under the repressive conditions existing at that time, could only certain Negroes leave the United States? But the real fighters for peace couldn't leave the country and couldn't go to Bandung. Because to unite Afro-Asia with Afro-America, in particular, the black worker, could decide the future, not only of black workers and workers in general in the United States, but in many ways the direction of the anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggles. That genuine principled unity of revolutionary and progressive forces had to be thwarted, hence Robeson and Du Bois were not allowed to attend Bandung, although they, of all Americans, represented best and fought hardest for the vision that became the Bandung vision. Some 25 years prior to Bandung, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a novel, a political novel, entitled The Dark Princess, subtitled A Romance between Africa and Asia, where he proposed, the great Pan-Africanist W.E.B. Du Bois proposed in 1929 the unity of Pan-Africa and Pan-Asia. A vision that I think is taking concrete form in this very moment as we speak about Bandung. I will explain. But that vision of the unity of Pan-Africa and Pan-Asia, the vast majority of humanity, the colonized masses of the world, that vision would be further developed theoretically, again in his last History of Africa called The World in Africa, the first chapter of which, and some would say ironically, was entitled The Collapse of Europe, published in 1947. The Collapse of Europe. Now, I am of the opinion that we are seeing the fruition of both dynamics that Du Bois spoke about. The unity of Pan-Asia, and I'll explain that. I think we have some important developments over the last week which suggest this. Hopefully, Africa will be able to overcome the now almost 150-year partition of that continent. Africa doesn't need 54 nations. No. Africa doesn't need a South Sudan nation. Africa does not need all of these divisions. No problems that affect Africans can be solved with this type of division. The vision of Pan-Africa must be a vision of a singular state that coordinates the activities of multiple civilizations that constitute the African continent. But at this point, it is Pan-Asia that consumes the attention of humanity. This at a time when Europe, and hence the European project of imperialism and empire, is in a crisis the likes of which it has never experienced. And I include in this the crisis produced by the Russian Revolution in World War I, the crisis produced by World War II and the anti-colonial movements. This crisis is an existential one. But so much depends on what the vanguard of the people can do. The Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on Friday stated in no uncertain terms that the future of the Korean Peninsula would be decided by Koreans. As the magnificent Kim Jong-un put it, and perhaps I'm going to use the words of Sly Stone, blood is thicker than mud. We are of one blood. We are brothers and sisters.
We are.
We don't need the white man
That's right.
involved in what we're trying to do here.
That's right.
Especially when a madman
Is at the helm.
says that to eliminate the North Koreans' nuclear arsenal, he's prepared to kill 20 million Koreans, whether they're in the North or South. That was a hell of a wake-up call. But you'd have to see the visuals of it. This was both a great celebration of Korea, of Korean civilization, of the Korean people's resistance to Japanese, Chinese, and Western attempts to occupy and colonize them. It was that waiting to exhale moment. At last, the family of the Korean people can be united. This is a great moment. It is, I think, the first great achievement against Western imperialisms and U.S. imperialism in particular, partitioning of Asia.
That's right.
Again, it was a celebration of Korean civilization. It was not just Kim Jong-un stepping over the border into South Korea. It was his being greeted by the South Korean state and a celebration of a common civilization. The other event that got less attention this week was the informal summit between Prime Minister Modi of India and President Xi Jinping of China. There has been an almost 60-year tension between these two great nations. I'd just like to indicate to you what Prime Minister Modi said concerning this coming together. He said in the past 2,000 years, 1,600 of those years were defined by the unity of China and India. And it was that unity, according to him, that was at the foundation of the economic and social development of the world, suggesting that the future, in many ways, could be decided by what Indians and Chinese do. This was a great move towards peace and against partition. If one understands the history of the anti-colonial struggle in India, and at the very moment of success, the British engineer the partition of India and the formation of Pakistan. If India and China can come to a rapprochement, if there can be peaceful coexistence between India and China, if India and China can get together, why not India and Pakistan? Why not Asia as a whole? And if Pan-Asia, with all of its complexities, can be united, then that will perhaps be an example for Pan-Africa.
That's right.
Some people say, how long will this take? I would say not long. We are very lucky to be alive at this time. This is a time of optimism, but a time of caution. But we have to build a peace movement in the United States. Not only do we need it, but the people demand it of us. This is, politics should be grounded in empirical evidence. Let us go among the people and hear what they say in their churches, in their union halls, in their communities. What are they saying? They're saying, we don't want to study war no more. They say if you can fund wars in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, why can't you fund education?
Come on, come on.
Why is it in Philadelphia, the fifth or sixth largest city, we're the first city in poverty and hunger of our children? The people are saying, we don't want war. We want education. We want jobs. We want a 21st century New Deal. We want justice. We want these prisons closed down. This is what the people are saying. And if this is what the people demand, we who call ourselves the tribunes of the people must respond to that demand. And so peace, as in every revolutionary situation, must be at the forefront of the demands for radical change. And by peace, I am not talking about surrender. I'm talking about a positive political agenda that attacks the very foundation of an unjust, oligarchic, financial capitalist, militarist, plutocratic system.
Yes.
When you put it all together, it's called a white supremacist social system.
That's what it is.
That more than anything else produces white supremacy and the toxic identity called whiteness. A peace movement of a new type is the major responsibility of the revolutionary vanguard at this time. I don't think we can lead the people. I don't think we have an agenda, a discourse that the people in their millions will respond to unless we put peace at the top of it. That's what they want. They're tired of their sons and daughters coming back in body bags, living their lives mutilated, without legs and arms, traumatized for life. They're tired of a culture that privileges war and thus turns brother against brother, sister against sister, son and sister against parents. And it's most pronounced among the most oppressed communities. We see it in Philadelphia. We have a problem in our black community with homicide, especially black men, young men killing one another. We cannot run from this, but we cannot blame the victims either. The issue is, what becomes of a dream deferred? What happens to people, young people, who are told from the cradle, your life doesn't mean anything? You tell a child that, an infant that, and if his life doesn't mean anything, then yours doesn't either.
That's right.
We want a cultural revolution. I know in the African American community, we have a strong tradition of music that talks about peace. Pharaoh Saunders and Leon Thomas. The Creator has a master plan.
Yeah.
Peace and happiness throughout the land. Alice Coltrane. John Coltrane. Allah Supreme. Allah Supreme. This tradition that in culture and music, suppressed by the ruling elite of this country for obvious reasons, was in its primary manifestations the uniting of Pan-African and Pan-Asian civilizations, a brilliant contribution to the political consciousness of the masses. And we must teach that culture. Let me just kind of end. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and Martin Luther King Jr. give us everything we need to build this movement. Everything. We don't have to go anywhere else. We have produced, and we should be proud of it. And sometimes it becomes difficult to understand it because it is black. We have produced visionaries and prophetic thinkers of world historic significance. Paul Robeson spoke 25 languages so that he could sing the folk music of all peoples. It's not a question of DNA, which of course is now proven that we are all of, as they say, one blood. But he said, I hear in the folk music of Africans, of Russians, of Chinese, of English and Scottish workers, of the Afro-American people's sorrow songs, blues. I hear a common message, a common humanity, a common striving. Paul Robeson sang the Soviet national anthem in Russian, the Chinese national anthem in Chinese, and any other national anthem in the language of the people. This great internationalist, remember, he couldn't go to Bandung. A common humanity represented in the common folk heritage of all people. Karl Marx would call it proletarian internationalism. Paul Robeson called it the common civilizational foundation of humanity. W.E.B. Du Bois, the greatest thinker ever produced in the United States, and one of the most important figures in world intellectual history, argued, and this, I think, might ground and perhaps give us a way to think about the moment and the future, grounded his thinking about the principal agency of social transformation in what he called the black worker. Chapter 1 of Black Reconstruction in America. Some people say, well, what's new about that? Everything is new about that. Because it's not just a part of, but the vanguard of the class conflict in the United States. The black worker is not what we usually imagine her or him to be. She is in a church on Sunday, a mosque on Friday. She works in service industry, hotel in Philadelphia, lives in a gentrifying neighborhood, and wants her children to be educated. The common aspirations of black people that go back to the time of enslavement. They sing the songs of their ancestors. They hear the poetry of their great poets. Du Bois empirically, I want to underline empirically, studied the black worker in the South and in the North. He would say that the black worker was everything African. This concept of everything African must be respected in our understanding of black folk. Not just a part of, but a vanguard of, connected not only to the political economy and working class of the United States, but of the working people of Africa and Asia. This unique force, it does not exist anywhere else in the world. And to understand it, listen to its music. Allah Supreme, John Coltrane. The Creator has a master plan, Pharaoh Saunders. Martin Luther King Jr., profoundly misunderstood. He wasn't assassinated because he was for nonviolence. He was assassinated because he opposed the U.S. militarist regime. In that great speech at Riverside Church, which I recommend a regular listening to and teaching of, he said, I don't want to speak to the National Liberation Front of Vietnam, South Vietnam, or the government in Hanoi. I wish to speak to my own government, the major purveyor of violence in the world.
That's right. That's right.
I listened to Amy Goodman, Noam Chomsky. I read The Intercept, the so-called reasonable left.
Go in.
Experts in the critique of everybody else but the failures of the white left in the United States.
You better preach.
When have you gone among your own people to educate them about the question of peace, white supremacy, and American imperialism? So before you critique Assad in Syria, or the revolutionary forces in Yemen, or what is right and wrong in Venezuela,
Exactly.
you need to do some self-critique. And as far as Bernie Sanders is concerned,
Let it out.
this beginning from the standpoint of social imperialism, war abroad and progress at home, the so-called guns and butter equation. Martin Luther King was none of this. He was a great internationalist, a great fighter for peace, a great fighter for the interest of ordinary people. The new peace movement that we must build, and we have to build it. Nothing is more important at this time than the building of a peace movement. And again, peace does not mean surrender. Peace means anti-imperialism. In a moment of the collapse of Europe and the system built almost 75 years ago, let us move forward. Let us fulfill our moral obligation, not just to our people, but to humanity itself. And even if it means putting humanity ahead of our own people, so be it. So be it. Thank you very much.
Wow, I see so many friends. Sister from my exercise class, a neighbor from my building. I love it. It's wonderful to see you all, those of you who come in. I just want to remind people that tomorrow is really D-Day for the Mumia movement and for Mumia. If you want to get on the bus, where's Gil Obler? Gil is back there wearing a Mumia t-shirt.
Man in the shorts.
Man in the shorts. He is selling bus tickets or car tickets. Please, if you can still go, join us tomorrow. We need everybody there. I mentioned earlier that the Fraternal Order of Police is mobilizing for it. We gotta be there. Second thing is, those of you who've had your appetites whetted by the various references to Mumia's book, it's on sale up front at the desk for $20. It's well worth that $20. Think of the things you spent $20 on. This is really worth it. So now my good friend and comrade in arms and humor is Esperanza Martel, who has a couple of quick words to say. And then we still have the speakers from Venezuela, so please don't leave. So far, has this been an interesting program?
Yes.
Has it been educational?
Yes.
Is it worth your time?
Yes.
So please hang in there and wait.
Now we're going to see how interested and if it really was worth your time. It's been 37 years since Mumia's been behind the walls. And we, the people, have kept them alive. We love his writings. We love his messages on the radio. We love Mumia. And Mumia, because of the will of the people, will be free.
That's right.
That's right.
So, I need you to play powerfully with me today and give me all the money you have in your pockets. Everything. And I take IOU. There's two people very shy who need to be passing that bucket because I only have 2 minutes to empty out your pockets. Listen, you know, before we used to say we need the money to buy flyers, right? So we got these beautiful flyers. Yes, we need money for flyers. We need money for those cards. But we need money to keep our legal machine going. Our legal machine. We need money when there's an emergency to get folks in front of the prisons. Right? We get a call at 3 or 4 in the morning. And then we got to get it out there. Gasoline is capitalism at its best. And it costs us a lot of money to get a bus to go out there. Sometimes, because of the will of the people like Estela, we might get a union to give us a free bus. Okay? But that's not all the time. When we get invited to go to Europe, or China, wherever, they don't pay our way. Representing Mumia in Geneva, Ramona and Pam Africa, right? The money you give is for that. So I need you to give me up your change. So they passed the bucket. I got my own little thing here going on. I take IOUs, I take checks. You know, the thing about Mumia's movement is that it's real people's working class movement. We are poor, okay? We don't get funded, right? And we're workers, or we're unemployed. That's who it is, because it's mainly a movement of people of color with a few allies. Okay? So we need your bucks. I need your bucks. No, I'm from Puerto Rico. And I just celebrated my 72nd birthday. And I committed to raise money for a women's organization in Puerto Rico, the, I'm always translating, the Puerto Rican Women Workers Organization. And I had my birthday party, okay, which is 3 days before Mumia's birthday. I'm on the 21st, Mumia's on the 24th. So, you know, I need you to give me at least 72 cents, a penny for every year that I've been on this planet. I would rather you give me $10 or, $10 for every year. I raised, my goal was $1,000. I raised $1,500. Okay? Poor working class people. In a community center in East Harlem. So let's see how much money you're going to cough up for me today. If you give again. Give again. I'm going to go buy, I'm going to harass you. I want IOUs, okay? Saeed is doing my security. He'll beat your ass. It's about really, really being unreasonable. Not drinking that other beer. Do not buy meat. It's not healthy for you this week anyway. Okay? Give up something. Give up something, not for Mumia, but for you and for our freedom. Mumia will be free. We will be free. We will make it so. Thank you. There we go. It's happening. Come on, get some more.
Wall by wall, free. Mumia, Abu-Jamal, brick by brick, wall by wall, we're gonna free. Mumia, Abu-Jamal, brick by brick, wall by wall, we're gonna free. Mumia, Abu-Jamal, brick by brick, wall by wall, we're gonna free. Mumia, Abu-Jamal, brick by brick.
Real quick, an announcement that the bus is going to be leaving at 5 in the morning instead of 5:30. Remember, we're trying to get in that place before the Fraternal Order of Police take it over. Pam, you wanted to make an announcement about a television program? Is Pam still here? Pam's going to say something, and then we're going to have the Venezuelans speak, so hang in there.
Want to move, family? Right. People from Philadelphia was ringing my phone off the hook because all day long the Fraternal Order Police using Maureen Faulkner, and which is the widow of Daniel Faulkner, urging people to come to court and support her. and that they will be on the outside, as well. So we really, really need people there in any kind of capacity that you can be in. If you can't make it there, be on the phones. If you're there, we need your eyes open. We need to be talking to people in the community. We want to have the information. Earlier this week, she started sending out, she did an editorial in the Philadelphia Inquirer, urging people to come, and she definitely said that she want Mumia killed. And to tell the district attorney in the top of the editorial, that she want him to keep Mumia in jail. Now, what's happening is a desperate move because we haven't seen these people in several years. But now that we have this new DA, and I believe in, I don't rally behind nobody till I see what you do. The proof is in the pudding. But he seemingly, some people think, was going to do something towards Mumia. And I haven't seen the evidence of that, but I've seen the evidence of other things that he has done. So we're really asking people to please get on that bus tomorrow. Come by, mega bus, China bus, any kind of bus that you can. And that train that comes, half train, whatever. And senior citizens can really ride free. Not free, close to free. So, that's my report that, we really, really need people here. We got people in the streets in Philadelphia, in France, Fanon, Marais Phenom, and she can hop here from Paris on over, and which is a great thing, and she's been traveling all over, and to get here, we really, really need people's help this particular time. And also, we need y'all to go live when you're there on your cameras. We're going to need security upstairs as well as downstairs in the courtroom is small. I want to let people know that. And they're going to more than likely put legal people in the courtroom, theirs, and their media in the courtroom, and try to, what we always work to get is split half and half. And I don't know what it's going to be in this era of Trump. But we got to be there, and we need to be there early enough. Those who want to get in the courtroom, it can't be a thing of like, hey, Pam, save me a seat. Can't do that. Can't do that tomorrow. So you want to have to be there on time, and even at that, they just might ahead of time, and have that courtroom packed. But our job is to be there, passing out information. Those that get in the courtroom, good. Those can be in the hallway upstairs, passing out information, talking to people, letting them know what's going on. We need that. We need people in the streets as well. We need a presence there. And I'm saying, with them coming, FOP truly means fools on parade. And so, what we got to do is be there to show the opposition to what is going on here. We are close to getting Mumia home. That's why these desperate, cowardly punks want to show up now. Want to move, long live revolution, and I'm sorry if I didn't use a motherfucker today.
Well, we needed Pam to top all our great speakers, didn't we? To join us at the end, too. We have now, I just can't keep watching and not acknowledging Zaid Mohammed, who's back there. And Zaid is always there, always there. When I think about security and everything else. Anyway, we have our next speaker is from Venezuela. And are you? Eugenia Rusian. And she's going to be translated by Leonardo. Okay, so I just want to say that she happens to be, Eugenia happens to be a nun in Venezuela, and we love revolutionary nuns.
Gracias.
Yo me siento hoy en mi casa con ustedes porque veo a Mandela, veo al Che Guevara, veo a Lumumba, veo amar a tanta gente que son referencia para la vida de los que trabajamos por la justicia.
Thank you so much. I feel at home here with you because I see so many people in the world, so Mandela, Lumumba, and so many others, people who are reference points for us.
Y efectivamente, yo soy monja venezolana y revolucionaria.
It's true, I'm a nun, a revolutionary nun.
Y el año pasado, en el 2016, estuvimos aquí denunciando la violencia política de la oposición venezolana que vive generando a lo largo de estos 19 años contra nuestro país.
In 2016, I was in this very room denouncing the violence generated by the opposition in Venezuela, who's been engaging in violence for these past 19 years.
Yo pertenezco a una organización de derechos humanos, la Fundación Latinoamericana por los Derechos Humanos y el Desarrollo Social, Fundalatin.
I belong to a human rights organization, the Latin American Foundation for Human Rights and Development. It's called Fundalatin.
Y nosotros hemos, a lo largo de este tiempo, los últimos 3 años, hemos estado denunciando por diferentes organismos multilaterales.
Over the past 3 years, we've been denouncing in front of different organizations, multilateral organizations,
El constante ataque y sistemático del gobierno de Estados Unidos contra Venezuela.
the constant and systematic attack of the government of the United States against Venezuela.
Estos ataques que ellos disfrazan que es para los funcionarios venezolanos,
They claim that these attacks are just against Venezuelan officials,
pero los verdaderos agredidos de estas sanciones va precisamente contra la economía y el sistema financiero de todo nuestro país.
but the real people that are being harmed are the Venezuelan people and our whole economic system.
Estas acciones, ¿qué es lo que imponen mediáticamente?
What is it that they're trying to impose with these sanctions?
Es la injerencia directa de los asuntos internos de Venezuela.
Or what do these sanctions imply? It's direct interference in the internal affairs of Venezuela.
Es una comunicación sesgada sobre la realidad venezolana.
And we get biased media reports about Venezuela's reality.
Y es una manipulación distorsionada de las transnacionales de comunicación contra nuestro país.
And the corporate media distorts and manipulates the truth about our country.
Nuestro país no tiene crisis humanitaria, no tiene crisis humanitaria.
There's no humanitarian crisis in Venezuela.
Lo que tiene es un ataque constante del gobierno de Estados Unidos contra nuestro pueblo.
What's happening is a continuous and permanent attack by the U.S. against our people.
Y bien sabemos que ese ataque constante es por los recursos que tiene nuestro país.
And we know that this attack occurs because of the resources we have.
En el 2015, el expresidente Obama hizo un decreto donde decía que nosotros somos amenaza para el gobierno norteamericano.
In 2015, President Obama issued an executive order that claimed that Venezuela was a threat to the United States.
Yo creo que somos amenaza porque el Estado venezolano ha puesto los ojos en los más vulnerables y los ha ayudado a recobrar su dignidad.
And I think we are a threat because the Venezuelan state has placed its emphasis, its priority on the most vulnerable people in Venezuela, and we have helped them regain their dignity.
Todos estos ataques los hemos denunciado ante la ONU, ante la CIDH, y esos organismos se mantienen totalmente sordos ante estas denuncias.
We have brought we have made demands, we have denounced this in front of the UN and in front of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, but they have ignored us.
Fíjense, yo les voy a poner algunos detalles para que ustedes vean cómo ha afectado a nuestro pueblo estas medidas unilaterales del gobierno de Estados Unidos.
I want to give you a few examples of how these unilateral measures by the United States have affected our people.
Por una parte, Citibank cerró las cuentas del Banco Central de Venezuela, que es el ente de del Estado venezolano que genera los recursos para proveer a nuestra nación de alimentos, de medicina, de tecnología, con la compra, todo lo que necesitamos.
So, for
Citibank
example,
nos tiene bloqueados.
Citibank closed the accounts of the Central Bank of Venezuela, and the Central Bank is what's in charge of importing food and medicine and technology. Citibank has blocked us.
Euroclar retuvo 1.650 millones de dólares al Estado venezolano por órdenes del gobierno de Estados Unidos, que eso iba a ser para la compra de alimentos y medicina para nuestro pueblo.
Euroclear detained $1.65 billion that belonged to the Venezuelan government that was going to go to the purchase of food and medicine for the people.
Otro banco que retuvo los ingresos de la venta de la energía a Brasil, 7.5 millones de dólares por toda la energía que le vende Venezuela a Brasil, el Wells Fargo, retuvo esa cantidad de dinero, no permitiéndole a nuestro país recibirlo para invertirlo en todo lo que tiene que ver con lo social.
Wells Fargo retained $7.5 million in profits, in oil sales that we had sold to Brazil, and they held on to that and refused to let it go back into Venezuela.
El laboratorio BSN, que distribuye el medicamento para la malaria, cuando Venezuela lo compró y ellos se enteraron que iba precisamente para el Ministerio de Salud de Venezuela, paralizaron que llegara el medicamento contra la malaria.
We bought malaria medicine from a lab in Colombia, and when this lab found out that the medicine was headed to Venezuela, they canceled the order. They refused to let it go through.
Entonces, constantemente es un ataque hacia la economía venezolana.
So it's a constant attack against the Venezuelan economy.
Y disfrazan el senador Marco Rubio junto con el gobierno de Estados Unidos de que es a los funcionarios venezolanos que están sancionando.
But then people like Marco Rubio and Senator Rubio and others from the U.S. government say no, these are just against Venezuelan high officials.
Por eso nuestra organización y nosotras como activistas de derechos humanos estamos por el mundo denunciando. Y no solo denunciando a los organismos multilaterales, sino a ustedes que están aquí, para que también sean portavoz en medio de este país sobre la situación y el ataque constante que está recibiendo Venezuela.
So that's why I and other human rights activists are going around the world denouncing these issues, and we hope that you can become spokespersons too about the truth about Venezuela.
Y nuestra organización de derechos humanos se siente realmente agradecida con ustedes, porque sabemos que el pueblo de Estados Unidos siempre ha sido solidario con Venezuela, el pueblo de Estados Unidos, no el gobierno de Estados Unidos.
And from our organization, we wanted to thank you because we know that the people of the United States have always expressed solidarity with us, the people, not the government.
Y yo cierro esto porque ya sé que se está agotando el tiempo con estas palabras de un gran líder que tuvo este pueblo, Martin Luther King.
And I want to close paraphrasing the words of a great leader of the U.S., Martin Luther King.
Luther King decía: en cualquier parte del mundo donde haya una injusticia, tenemos que elevar la voz, tenemos que levantar la voz.
Martin Luther King said that where there is injustice in the world, we have to raise our voices against it. We have to raise our voices.
Llegó el tiempo de mantenernos firmes, de anunciar y denunciar todo lo que genere el sistema capitalista, que siempre es un sistema de muerte.
And so we have to maintain it firm in denouncing this capitalism and the capitalist system, which is a system of death.
Y nosotros nos comprometemos con ustedes también de empezar una campaña contra este compañero que está privado de libertad injustamente, y que queremos también levantar las banderas de paz por él y por la lucha de todos los que estamos aquí para descolonizar de la mente y del corazón todo el sistema que oprime.
And we commit ourselves to joining in the efforts to our great friends here in Mumia, because we need to decolonize our minds and decolonize the world.
Muchas gracias por el tiempo.
Thank you so much for your time.
I just want to tell people that on President Chavez's last birthday on this planet, on this earth, Mumia sent a birthday greeting, which I brought, to Venezuela, and it was played on public radio from 8 o'clock in the morning all day long, and William Camacaro, sitting up here, was the one who arranged that. And that was an amazing, we didn't know yet that he was dying. And a historic act of solidarity. And yes, we extend our 100% solidarity to the revolution of Venezuela. We have two, SB's going to announce how much money was collected in a minute, but also we have two young sisters who are going to come up to the front and ask our speakers, are they all still here, a few questions. So this is not an open mic for everyone to ask questions, just two young people. Anyone else who's young, meaning under 30, and I say this as someone who's definitely not under 30, anyone else who can speak. This is our chance for the young people to ask the questions they have of our very, very wise elders. So come on up. Amelia and Kyla, who are also great artists, by the way, both of them, in addition to be activists. They're wonderful artists. Okay, and now here comes Espy.
So we raised, I want you to applaud yourselves first. Before I tell you how much you raised, applaud yourselves. Come on. Woo! You raised $290. More applause. It's excellent. So what I need is either somebody just give me $10 or 10 people give me $1 each, or you give me $100 more and I'll be a happy camper.
Somebody left this.
Oh, somebody already knew I was coming back. Okay, so any of you want to give a little bit more, this is the time. I love you, we love you. There is love, and we are making revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Espy, who just turned 72 last week. Okay, so I welcome you both to the podium, and please speak. They've both been activists since a very young age, and amazing, amazing sisters. Take it. Should we take this one?
All right. What's up, y'all? Power to the people. All power to the people. Okay, so we're just gonna keep this short and sweet. We have 4 questions. I lied. We have 5. Look at me lying already. We have 5 questions. Okay, I'm gonna start it off. And this is, any of the speakers can speak. Some of them are to specific, but this is to everybody. So you all spoke about corporate media, especially on television. What can you say to the ways the internet, the digital divide, and social media are being used for propaganda and or used for revolution?
All right. Anybody can come up. Any of the speakers can come up to answer that question.
Not all at once.
Come on.
You want to ask all the questions first?
No.
Hey,
We'll
let's
take one question.
I'll just address that very, very briefly. FAIR, the progressive watchdog on media, noted that of all the newspapers, corporate newspapers in the country, not one opposed Trump's bombing of Syria. That says it all in terms of the posture of the corporate media. In terms of the internet, we at Black Agenda Report speak as the only black organization that got put on the Washington Post /Prop or Nots list of useful idiots of the Russians and basically henchmen for Putin. What's transpired, that happened right after the election, before even the signing in of Trump. What's happened in the interim is that the corporate internet powerhouses, Google and Facebook, have changed their algorithms. Now remember, we don't know what the fucker's algorithm is. and they're not obligated to tell us what it is because that's corporate proprietary information. See? So they don't have to explain how we get the results that we get when we go on a search, or how our information in Facebook is used, because that's algorithmic, and they've changed the algorithm, and the result is that all of the left-wing sites that got pointed out, named by Prop or Not, and a whole bunch of others who were not named in that, have reported drastic diminishing of visitorship, which means that people can't find them. It means when I used to use Google to find my own articles, because Google's search mechanism was better than the search mechanism on our own site. And I would come up, if I put in the right words, with several pages of articles. Now, if I put in the right words, same words, I'll come up with 2, maybe 3 stories. So it's no longer a reliable mechanism. When the author can't find his own goddamn story, you know. So, but that's the limit of my response.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So y'all give it up for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, all power to the people. I have a question for Professor Tony Monteiro. You were speaking about peace and the importance of peace in movements that are anti-imperialist movements. If we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and a lot of people are incarcerated for fighting for Black nationalism and liberation, and Malcolm X taught us by any means necessary. I have a question, because we live in such a violent system, and now this issue of gun control is constantly being brought up, and at the same time, the pigs have guns and they're murdering us, and there's so much violence in our communities as well, and I always have a divide when it comes to guns, because on one level, it's like if we have young people that are being pushed to use all types of substances, and our images and messages of freedom that we are receiving are basically like teaching us to glorify their drug system, their mass incarceration system, and like putting trapping as the only escape. How do we speak to young people about standing up and fighting back and having their rights defended and protected by any means necessary, while at the same time understanding that we can never win against their system using their tools, because they have more bombs and more guns and more anything than we could ever imagine.
Okay, come on up, Tony. Right. Save the easy one for you.
Thank you very much for that question, which is the topic for an all-day conference. But I mean, I think the short answer is there are no shortcuts to the victories for the people, and the flip side of that is that the obligation of revolutionaries is always the political education of the people and establishing ideological clarity. I know, because I was once young, that, there's a predisposition, I'm not saying it's absolute, but a predisposition among young people to believe, and sometimes it's based upon what elders say, that revolutionary change can come quickly, that the obligation of revolutionaries is to stand above and outside of the people, where I think that the strategy of revolutionary change that I am interested in is that which goes deeper among the people. And if we are successful in that, the people become the agents of their own liberation. And that was, if I might just say, one of the great mistakes of many revolutionaries I think of the period that you all reference a lot, was the idea that a small cadre of revolutionaries could become the substitute for the people. So I think the political education of the younger generation, one big thing, a cultural revolution. I mean, I think Nina Simone might be really good medicine at this time. And so on and so forth. Paul Robeson all the time, you know. And I think this is what we have to do. I think it's the long, patient work of education and thus countering the propaganda of the ruling class that wants to shut young people down, and I would say especially young black people who have this great potential to stop the system, make the system unworkable and ungovernable. That's Winnie Mandela, of course.
Thank you.
I lost my question. You want to ask one? I can't.
So this is to all of the panelists and also just the elders in the room that have been doing this work for so long. How do you not only how do you not burn out, but what are the tools that you use in order to keep the faith? Because somebody like Esperanza Martel, I've been seeing her since I was little, going everywhere with flyers and petitions and cards for political prisoners, just passing the hat and the bucket and saying, I am on, I am on, I am on. Pam Africa, Ramona Africa, who was bombed and survived and is still out here fighting. Suzanne Rose, who's been fighting for so long. Baba Zaid. Just, this system is still the same bullshit ass system that people have been fighting against for so long. And I sometimes get very disillusioned seeing that time and time again we have these like surges of winds of hope, and then Mumia is still behind bars for 37 years. And so yeah, just what are the tools that give us hope and faith to continue fighting? How do we, the energy, what holds that spirit up? And what can you give us, if any, advice to young people of kind of...
There's a lot of young people who have gotten a little bit of enlightenment to a lot of these situations, but they're already helpless or hopeless. You know, so looking at the people that we have in this room, you know, with this legacy of work, what can you tell us? And also tell us to communicate to the young people who are not in this room. You know, one of the biggest hopes is that one day we have events like this and it's full of young people. You know, so what can you tell us, anybody?
Sarah, you want to do it?
Yes, in the back, come on, forward to the mic.
Okay, come on, Sarah.
Back on what Brother Monteiro said. You can't.
The memory is.
This is Sister Betty.
And I know Suzanne can say amen to this. You know, cats don't educate mice. They eat them. And if you want to save the mice, you have to go where the mice are. The majority of our children, and I'm talking about the 7th generation to come, they're not going to be in these charter schools. And the corporations are actively working at decimating the public school system. And I'm going to reference Brother Monteiro again. You know that Fanon and Paulo Freire talked about the pedagogy of the oppressed.
Yes.
And so if you want to save them, go into the prisons where they are, which is the public school system. This so-called Democratic mayor is dealing the death blow to public education in New York City. I went with a group of my parents to what they call these panels on educational policy, where they are supposedly inviting parents to have a say-so in educational change, and what they are rubber stamp on giving our schools to the corporations. They're shutting down 39 public schools. And the issue that they're using to do this is the ethnic cleansing, which they call gentrification. So where you have black schools that are functioning, where there's unity between parents and students and community, those are the schools they are targeting, all right? And they are then putting a charter school in there because they are referencing them by saying they are underutilized, without telling the truth that they're being pushed off the reservation, and that's why they may have some vacancies in their building. They're letting the charter schools come in and take them. So I invite everybody here to do what one of our grannies is doing. They are fighting the militarization of our schools. Right. Get your foot in the door that way if you have to. Stop the ROTC. They're taking the public schools, which is the biggest union employment system in our communities. They're taking all of those jobs in the public school system. It's the 23rd largest budget in the world, the New York City school budget. Fight for that budget. Fight for the union jobs in that budget for the people in the community, and you'll have a revolution because you'll have their minds back. And as Tony knows, the minute we take the children's minds, we can stop black on black crime, because as pedagogy of the oppressed teaches you, you will stop self-hate and internalization of oppression. It's a win-win. The unions can do this. The people can do this. Let's do this. Stop the charterization of the public school system. And that's how you keep your faith. I fight for the schools. I'm in there with the children, and that's what gives me the energy to keep going. The opposite of what could happen if we lose is horrible, because they will be insane and they will be killing Africans abroad. Mm-hmm. You understand? Mm-hmm. And every time I vision our brothers going into Iraq and kicking down their doors, that gives me the energy to get up every morning and fight for their minds. So fight for the public school system, fight for those jobs, and you'll save the kids. You'll have the energy and the love to keep going. Thank you, Susan.
She's a teacher too. We're going to quit now. The program.
There are two young people who sing beautiful songs. Could they just give us a rendition of Alice Coltrane?
I can't refuse that.
Can I just introduce them?
Absolutely. So we have, first of all, it turns out we collected close to $400. That's number one. Number two, I want to thank SP, who always does this on the drop of a hat and raises tons of money with love and devotion. I also want to thank this amazing audience. What an audience you've been. Sitting patiently, listening, giving the most wonderful vibes. I wish I could mention so many of the names that of people I know and love in this room, but would take up too much time. Also, our two young sisters who asked these questions, who did not read the book before, did not exactly know everything about this program, and came up with these questions. And it shows the power of the youth and the power of young act. These sisters were trained, Amelia was trained in Impact, the Impact Youth Group. Performed, I met her when she was a kid, performing and acting like a young teenager. I met Kyla through a friend of mine who's unfortunately passed, but she was a young kid who was going to Cuba on delegations to Cuba. She was about 15 at the time, at 15. So these are wise, wise sisters, and they are part of the movement, and they are part, definitely, of what gives me constant inspiration. So I want to thank everybody again, but here comes Tony with his young singers. Where are they?
I just asked Suzanne, it might be nice, two of the young people from Philadelphia are here, Serafina Harris and Divya Nair, and I asked them if they would be willing to sing. Divya will sing a peace song written by Alice Coltrane, And Serafina, I forget what she will sing, but suppose Serafina comes up first. But you want Divya to go first? Okay, let Divya come first. She'll tell you what she's going to sing. I think you'll enjoy it. You should explain to them what it is.
Oh, yes. Thank you, everyone. I didn't expect to sing today, but thanks for having me. And I just want to reiterate what Dr. Monteiro said during his presentation, that this is an existential question. And this reminds me of Fanon, actually, and also his relationship with Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a French philosopher writing at the time. And Fanon said, you know, we have to leave Europe to its own problems. And one of the major contributions he made to the humanities was that, you know, we have to leave this pretended humanism of the West behind and we have to discover our own humanity because they don't think we are human, right? So there's no reason for us to go to their art, their literature, their music, because we will not discover ourselves in that. And that's right. So in that spirit, I sing this song. It's by the great Alice Coltrane. And you know, after the death of John Coltrane, she studied with a Hindu guru, and a lot of her pieces later took on that character. And this song is called Ohm Shanthi, and it's a invocation of world peace. And it's a Hindu devotional, bhajan we call it, but sung in the African American spiritual tradition. So. Should we stand for it? Oh, okay. I'm gonna just try to sing it. Okay.
Take your time.
All right. Not even hear me. Om Jai Rama, Jai Krishna Hare Om. 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 Om Shanti Om, Shanti Om, Shanti 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 Om. Anantanata Param Brahman Om. Anantanata Param Brahman Om. Om Anantanata Param Brahman Om. Anantanata Param Brahman Om. Om Vittala Keshava Madhava Hare Om. Vittala Keshava Madhava Hare Om. Om Jai Krishna Jai Rama 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 Hare Om. Hare Om. Hare Om. Hare Om. Hare Om. Krishna, Jai Rama Hari Om. Om Jai Krishna, Jai Rama Hari Om. Om Jai Rama, Jai Krishna Hari Om. Om Jai Rama, Jai Krishna Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om.
In order to end with this song, we're going to have a quick announcement now. One second. We're going to have a quick announcement and then the last song on which we will end. We really will end.
We got to end with the power of music.
That's right.
That's what we want to do.
That's right.
So I'm speaking for an event that I think everyone here knows about and I see every year. But what is Tuesday?
May Day! International Workers' Day!
International Workers' Day, and everyone here, thousands of others, we're going to be out in force at Union Square from 12 on with a march at 5. There's work sessions here tomorrow and early Tuesday morning, so everyone who can join us at Union Square or join us in the build-up of Union Square, very much invited, because it really is a day of international solidarity. The other thing is next Sunday, to really continue this discussion, because I can't think of a more incredible and powerful discussion than today. But we're having a very interesting program called Marx at 200. It's the 200th anniversary of the birth of Karl Marx, and we're going to be talking about the class struggle today. Why Black Lives Matter is a class issue, and why workers are still a revolutionary class. We're going to be talking about the role of migrant workers, prisoners, sex workers, women, LGBT workers, teacher strikes, a lot of issues, and that's going to be next Sunday. What is it? 2 o'clock, I think. 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock at the Vision Center. So pick up one or several of these cards and let's continue this discussion, because this has really been incredible today, and thank you so much.
Serafina, please. Welcome.
Your fault.
She's such a sweet blacksmith.
I think this is more just like an answer to your question you had. Yeah.
I ain't got no home, ain't got no shoes, ain't got no money, ain't got no class, ain't got no skirts, ain't got no sweater, ain't got no perfume, ain't got no bed, ain't got no man. Ain't got no mother, ain't got no culture, ain't got no friends, ain't got no schooling, ain't got no love, ain't got no name, ain't got no ticket, ain't got no token, ain't got no God. But hey, what I got, why my life anyway? Yeah, what I got, Got my fingers, got my legs, my feet, my toes, got my liver, got my blood.
Yeah, I always remember that.
So tell me what I got, hey. I got my life, I got my freedom, I got my life, I got my freedom, and I'm gonna keep it. Oh, I got the life.
Talk of inspiration.
She's 18 years old. There she go home.
18 years
That's right.
old.
That's the hope.
18 years old, that's our hope. Right. Thank you, Tony, for bringing them up. Thank you again, everybody, for a wonderful, inspiring community event. We love you all. We love Mumia. We continue the struggle. Free Mumia, free them all! And finally, all the speakers, I've been asked by the photographers, all the speakers, please come up here. They want a group photo of the speakers, okay? Thank you. See you tomorrow. See you soon. See you everywhere in the streets, on the battlefield of peace.
Yeah.